Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's story is going to be different from my usual content. This is the true account of a corporate whistleblower who risked everything to expose massive fraud at one of America's largest manufacturing companies. Names have been changed to protect identities, but every detail you're about to hear is real. This is the story of how one 59-year-old accountant brought down an empire built on lies. Picture this. You've worked at the same company for 19 years. You've been loyal, dedicated, the kind of employee who stays late to make sure every number balances to the penny. Then one Tuesday morning, you're called into a sterile conference room where your career dies in under 5 minutes. That's exactly what happened to Robert Martinez, Senior Financial Controller at Meridian Industrial Solutions. Due to restructuring, your position is being eliminated, announced Sarah Mitchell, the Chief Financial Officer, without even looking up from her tablet. Outside the conference room, security guards waited like vultures. 19 years of service. And this was how it ended, with a cardboard box and a security escort. "We'll need your access card and parking pass," added David Thompson, the newly appointed controller, sliding that infamous cardboard box across the polished conference table. "Security will escort you to collect your personal items." Robert placed his access card on the desk, but kept his briefcase close. Inside was an encrypted flash drive containing 3 years of meticulous documentation. Every suspicious transaction, every irregular payment, every audit that had mysteriously been canceled. Sarah and David thought they were cleaning house, getting rid of the old-school accountant who asked too many inconvenient questions. What they didn't know was that Robert had been documenting everything since the day the new management took over. As Robert walked through the lobby, past co-workers who suddenly found their shoes fascinating, he allowed himself one small, tight smile. They thought he was leaving with nothing. He was leaving with everything they didn't want found. Robert nodded once. He didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. He just watched Sarah's perfectly manicured fingers tap impatiently on the glass surface. "Is there anything you'd like to say, Robert?" Her tone suggested she expected tears, anger, maybe even gratitude. "No," he replied simply. "Thank you for the opportunity." He stood, straightened his tie, and tucked his leather briefcase under his arm. The same briefcase his late wife Jennifer had given him 15 years ago, back when he still believed in corporate loyalty. The security guard, Marcus, looked genuinely embarrassed as he followed Robert to his office. "Sorry about this, Mr. Martinez," he whispered as Robert carefully packed his wife's photograph. "Not your fault, Marcus. To understand what Meridian became, you need to know what it used to be." Robert had joined when the company was still family-owned, run by Thomas Meridian himself, a man who walked the factory floor every morning, who knew every employee's name. "Numbers don't lie, Robert," Thomas used to tell him. "People do. Your job is to make sure our numbers tell the truth." Meridian manufactured precision components for aerospace and defense contractors. They were known for quality, reliability, and ethical business practices. Then Thomas retired, and everything changed. The sale to Apex Holdings Group happened quietly. At first, nothing seemed different. But Robert noticed the small changes. Corner cutting that would have been unthinkable under Thomas's leadership. Cheaper materials, longer payment terms with suppliers. Robert's follow-up emails went unanswered. Monthly financial meetings became one-way presentations where questions were discouraged. Younger employees with connections to Sarah or David found themselves fast-tracked for promotions. Veteran staff discovered their positions were being evaluated. Greg Martinez from purchasing was the first to confide in Robert. "Something's not right," he whispered. these invoice discrepancies. They're not random errors. 2 weeks later, Greg was gone. Performance issues, according to the official announcement. Robert knew better. The real transformation began when Sarah Mitchell arrived from a multinational corporation with a reputation for aggressive cost-cutting. 6 months later, David Thompson joined as deputy controller, young, ambitious, with no manufacturing background, but plenty of connections to Sarah's previous company. The warning signs were subtle: vendor payments that didn't match received inventory, consulting fees to companies Robert couldn't find in any business registry, executive expense reports with duplicate charges that somehow always got approved. When Robert raised these concerns, Sarah had smiled, all teeth, no warmth. "We're transitioning to new suppliers," she'd explained. "The numbers will balance out." They never did. The night after Greg's termination, Robert started keeping a second set of books, the real ones. Working late in his office, he began documenting every suspicious transaction, every policy change that removed financial safeguards. This wasn't about revenge. It was about honoring the promise he'd made to Thomas Meridian, to make sure the numbers told the truth. The deeper Robert dug, the more disturbing the picture became. Meridian wasn't just cutting corners. They were systematically defrauding their customers and the government. Payments were being made to shell companies that provided no goods or services. Robert traced one payment of $2.3 million to a consulting firm that turned out to be a residential address in Delaware. The government contracts were even more troubling. Meridian had been overbilling federal agencies for years, inflating costs and charging for work that was never performed. But the most shocking discovery came when he analyzed the employee pension fund. Sarah and David had been borrowing from it for over a year. If the pattern continued, there wouldn't be enough left to pay retirees their promised benefits. Robert's daughter Lisa noticed the change in her father during their weekly phone calls. "You're working too late, Dad. What's going on?" He couldn't tell her the truth. "Just busy season," he lied. The stress was taking its toll. Robert found himself double-checking locks, varying his route to work. People who asked too many questions at Meridian had a habit of disappearing. In late March, David announced a reorganization of the finance department. The new structure would place David's inexperienced nephew, Kevin, between Robert and all executive financial approvals. "We need fresh perspectives," David explained. "Kevin brings innovative ideas about financial management." Kevin Thompson was 26 with an accounting degree and 18 months of experience. He knew nothing about manufacturing or government contracts. What Kevin did know was how to follow orders without asking questions. Robert realized his time was running out. The reorganization was designed to isolate him, to prevent him from accessing the information he needed. That's when Robert made his final preparations. He copied every document he could access, created detailed timelines of fraudulent activities, and prepared evidence packages for multiple recipients. The axe fell on that Tuesday morning in April. Looking at his termination letter, Robert realized the cost of staying honest was about to become very real. The first week after his termination was the hardest. The severance package arrived 3 days later. 5 months' salary for 19 years of service, contingent on signing a non-disclosure agreement designed to silence him permanently. Robert called Lisa for advice. "They're scared of something," she concluded after reviewing the document. "This goes way beyond standard confidentiality terms." That afternoon, Sarah Mitchell appeared at his front door, wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Robert," she said warmly, "I wanted to personally check on how you're adjusting. The severance paperwork, she said, placing a revised copy on his coffee table. We can offer an additional 2 months if you sign today. What's the rush? The board is finalizing next quarter's budget. We need to close out all pending obligations. Like properly paying vendors. The words slipped out before Robert could stop them. Sarah's expression flickered. Robert called his old college roommate, Michael Patterson, now a federal prosecutor. I need to talk to you about some financial irregularities, he said. It's extensive. They met downtown. Michael listened as Robert outlined the evidence. This is bigger than bookkeeping irregularities, Michael said. If you're right about the government contracts, we're talking federal crimes, but we need more. Someone on the inside. The Westfield Industries invoices, Robert said carefully. The ones that appeared without corresponding inventory receipts. Clerical errors, she replied smoothly. And the consulting payments to Synergy Solutions, the company that shares an address with your brother-in-law's home office? Sarah's smile vanished completely. I'd be very careful with accusations, Robert. Did you remove any company documents? Because that would constitute theft. I kept copies of my work product, as permitted in the employee handbook. She stood abruptly. I'll give you until tomorrow to reconsider our offer. After that, things might become complicated. That evening, Robert's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off if you know what's good for you. We know about the files. The intimidation began immediately. A dark sedan parked across from his house. His bank called about unauthorized access attempts. His email flooded with subscription confirmations he'd never requested. The call came from Maria Santos, Robert's former assistant, through a secure messaging app. We need to meet, she typed, somewhere completely private. They met at Robert's brother's cabin upstate. Maria arrived looking exhausted, constantly checking her mirrors. They're conducting a full audit, she said without preamble. But it's not real. They're changing records, Robert, backdating approvals, creating paper trails that never existed. Maria pulled out an encrypted flash drive. I've been documenting everything. The before and after records, the fake timestamps, the manufactured approvals. Robert stared at the device. You're risking everything. They're already planning to eliminate my position next month. She laughed bitterly. I found out when they accidentally copied me on the restructuring email. What Maria had documented went far beyond Robert's suspicions. The fraud was systematic and deliberate. Meridian had been overcharging government contracts by 30–40%, falsifying safety certifications, and creating phantom inventory to inflate company valuation. There's more, Maria said, pulling up emails. They're preparing to sell the manufacturing division to private equity. The employees won't know until it's done. The pension fund? Her expression confirmed his fears. They've been using it as a corporate slush fund. If the sale goes through, there won't be enough to cover retirees' benefits. Who else knows? Just the executive team, and now you. She hesitated. And maybe someone else. James Williams from Quality Control started asking questions last month. He disappeared a week before you were terminated. Disappeared? No termination paperwork. His file shows he resigned, but his badge was never deactivated, and his office was cleaned out overnight. Robert spent days trying to locate James Williams. The quality control manager had been with Meridian for 12 years. If he had discovered fraudulent certifications, it would explain his sudden disappearance. James's apartment had been vacated, his lease terminated with no forwarding address. His ex-wife said he'd called once to say he was going away, but wouldn't explain why. Then, at 2 a.m., Robert's phone rang. "Robert?" The voice was barely recognizable, strained with fear. "James? Where are you?" "Listen carefully. The aerospace contracts. Check the testing documentation against actual test results. They're falsifying safety certifications for critical components." "James, are you safe?" "They threatened my family. Said they'd make sure my kids—" "I can't come back, Robert. But someone needs to stop them before people die." The line went dead. Robert called Michael immediately. "We need to move fast," he said, explaining James's call. "If they're falsifying safety certifications for aerospace components, people could die." "This changes everything," Michael replied. "I'm bringing in the Department of Defense." 3 hours later, Robert sat with Michael and two Defense Criminal Investigative Service investigators. They listened as he laid out everything: the financial fraud, the pension theft, the falsified certifications, the missing witness. "We'll need your complete cooperation," one investigator said. "This investigation will become very visible. Your safety might be compromised." "I understand. We can arrange protective custody." Robert shook his head. "I have a better idea." The next morning, Robert called Sarah directly. "I've been thinking about that severance package," he said, keeping his voice defeated. "I'd like to discuss terms." "Wise decision," she replied. "Come to the office tomorrow at 9 a.m. "Actually, I'd prefer somewhere neutral. The Harbor View Hotel has private conference rooms." Sarah agreed. What she didn't know was that the Harbor View was already crawling with federal agents, its rooms wired for recording, every entrance under surveillance. The Constitution Room felt unnaturally quiet as Sarah reviewed Robert's paperwork. Her attorney sat beside her, occasionally whispering. "This all looks in order," she finally said, sliding the non-disclosure agreement across the table. "Just sign here and we can put this behind us." Robert looked at the document, 12 pages designed to silence him forever. "Before I sign," Robert said carefully, "this covers all company matters, correct?" "Of course." Sarah lunged for her phone, but an agent intercepted her. "David Thompson and the other executives are being detained simultaneously," he explained. Robert didn't stay to watch them lead Sarah away. His part was done, including the pension fund irregularities and the falsified safety certifications. The attorney stiffened. Sarah's smile faltered. "All company matters," she confirmed. "Standard language." Robert nodded, reached for his pen, then paused. "One more question. Does this cover my obligation to report federal crimes I've witnessed?" "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything." Robert stood slowly. "I'm stating that I've already provided evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and criminal endangerment to federal authorities, including this conversation." The conference room door opened. Michael Patterson walked in, flanked by FBI agents and defense investigators. "Sarah Mitchell," one agent said, "we have warrants to search all Meridian facilities and seize financial records." Sarah's face drained of color as Michael placed a thick folder on the table. "This is just a fraction of what we have," he said quietly. "The rest is being presented to a grand jury next week." The federal investigation moved with surprising speed. Within 48 hours, Meridian's offices were sealed, computer systems analyzed, employees interviewed. The media coverage was intense. Major defense contractor under investigation for fraud dominated headlines. The story had everything: corporate corruption, stolen pensions, falsified safety documents, government contracts worth hundreds of millions. Robert found himself at the center of a media storm he'd never wanted. Reporters camped outside his house. He declined all interviews, referring questions to Michael's office, Sarah Mitchell, David Thompson, and 4 other executives were indicted on multiple federal charges, including mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and violations of the False Claims Act. The total fraudulent billings exceeded $200 million. Maria Santos became the government's star witness, testifying about the systematic document manipulation. James Williams eventually came forward, providing evidence about the falsified safety certifications. The trial lasted 6 months. Robert testified for 3 days, walking the jury through the financial irregularities and intimidation tactics. Sarah Mitchell was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. David Thompson received 10 years. The company was fined $400 million and banned from government contracts. But the real victory came in the civil proceedings. The pension fund was partially restored through asset recovery. It wasn't everything stolen, but enough to ensure retirees wouldn't lose their homes. 6 months after the trial, Robert stood in the renovated Meridian Legacy manufacturing facility, watching workers on the assembly line. The manufacturing division had been sold to employee investors, renamed to honor the ethical practices Thomas Meridian had established. They'd asked Robert to help establish new financial systems, proper ones, with transparency and accountability built into every process. "All finished for the day, Mr. Martinez?" Marcus, the security guard who had once escorted Robert out, now greeted him with genuine respect. "Just about," Robert replied, returning his visitor badge. Outside, Lisa waited in her car. She'd driven down from Chicago for the company's first annual ethics symposium, where Robert had been the keynote speaker. "How did it go?" she asked. "Good. They're committed to doing things right. They won't need me looking over their shoulders much longer. Any regrets?" Lisa asked as they pulled into Robert's driveway. Robert thought carefully. The past 3 years had been the most difficult of his life. The stress, the legal proceedings, the media attention, it had all taken a toll. But when he thought about the retirees who still had their pensions, the workers who had jobs at the reformed company, and the military personnel who would no longer be endangered by defective equipment, the answer was clear. "No," he said finally. "I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because it was right." That evening, Robert packed away his files on the Meridian case. The story was documented, preserved, but he no longer needed to carry it with him. Tomorrow, he was starting a new consulting practice, helping small manufacturers implement ethical financial controls. It wasn't the retirement he'd planned, but it was meaningful work that honored the promise he'd made to Thomas Meridian. So there you have it. The true story of how one man's commitment to honesty brought down a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Robert Martinez didn't set out to be a whistleblower. He was just an accountant who wanted the numbers to tell the truth. The Meridian case became a landmark in corporate fraud prosecution, cited in business schools across the country. It demonstrated that even sophisticated fraud schemes can be exposed when someone has the courage to speak up. But perhaps more importantly, it showed that doing the right thing isn't always easy. Robert lost his job, his security, and his peace of mind. He faced intimidation, legal threats, and financial pressure. But he also saved hundreds of jobs, protected retirees, and potentially prevented catastrophic safety failures. The price of integrity is often high, but the cost of corruption is always higher. Robert Martinez paid the price and saved his company's soul. Thanks for watching. And remember, the truth always has a way of coming out. Sometimes it just needs someone brave enough to help it along. The executives who thought they could silence him by firing him had made a fatal miscalculation. They assumed loyalty could be bought, that integrity was negotiable, and that fear was stronger than conscience. they were wrong. Today, Meridian Legacy Manufacturing is thriving under employee ownership. The company has returned to its roots of quality manufacturing and ethical business practices. The pension fund has been restored, and the workers have job security. Robert Martinez is now 62, semi-retired, and working as an ethics consultant. He speaks at conferences, advises companies on fraud prevention, and helps other whistleblowers navigate the challenges of exposing corporate corruption. When asked about his experience, he always says the same thing. "I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because it was right." In a world where corporate greed often seems to go unpunished, his story reminds us that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win.